What up, everybody? Welcome to a mobile edition of Master the NEC. My name's Paul Abernathy, your host for this mobile edition. If you haven't listened to my podcast before, we have over 1,000 episodes that you can listen to from our mobile app or by simply going to your favorite podcast listening platform and just searching for Master the NEC podcast and just scroll back through the episodes. I've been doing this thing for well over a decade and a half, probably 2 decades, since all the way back in 2004. So there you go. That's more than 2 decades. But I believe we have episodes dating back many years available on all of your favorite social listening platforms like Deezer, Spreaker, iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts. Of course, if you get our free mobile app, which is free, over on our website, fasttracksystem.com, it's free. All you got to do is the navigation. You'll see mobile app and download it. It's no heavy software to download. Doesn't bog up your phone. It's just an icon that goes to a web browser that is actually our web app. Okay, so it makes it so much easy for you. So check it out. It's free. Doesn't cost you anything. And we have a bunch of other stuff there too, like calculators and just some nifty stuff. You can even chat with us on the app as well. So that is cool. So anyway, my name is Paul Abernathy. If you've never listened to me before, I teach people the National Electrical Code. I take things that are difficult to understand and I make it easy to understand. And we've created courses around that concept, and we call them the Fast Track System. So if you want to watch any of our demos, just go to our website, choose the course of your choosing. I recommend the basic or the enhanced. And watch those videos, and you'll see a little bit about what's included in the course, kind of an overview. But yes, we do calculations, single family, multifamily, non-dwelling calculations. We test you on it. There's a lot of Q&A questions, all kinds of good stuff in that program. And if you get the enhanced, you also get access to Fast Track's Tube as well. Just remember, you have a separate registration process you have to do on that website. But again, process is all detailed in your course. All right, let's talk today. So there's been a lot of talk, different social media, different people posting that believe they're in the know. They have this authority that they understand what an AHJ is, an authority having jurisdiction. And they want to convey this on to everybody else, right? So I'm here to set the record straight so you understand a little bit more about what authority an AHJ has. So in the scheme of the NEC, so the NEC itself is an advisory document. It's not a book of law. It's an advisory document that's put out by NFPA that states can utilize, jurisdictions can utilize as a minimum safety standard when it comes to electrical installations within their jurisdiction. And so it can be ratified and adopted by the state. It can be done by local jurisdiction. Hell, you can even use the NEC in a governmental facility where it's not under the scope of any type of jurisdiction, but the military have their own hierarchy of authority having jurisdiction that could also utilize the NEC as well. So again, important to understand the differences in what an AHJ is. Now, when it comes to you being an electrician and you going and doing a job and the inspector fails you, and everybody says, well, I'm just going to do whatever the inspector says because they can make up things and do whatever they want to do. That is not true. Now, it may appear that way, right? It may seem that way because, again, if you in a jurisdiction, they might give the impression that they are the means to be all, that you have to follow them. If you want to get the job done, you do as they say, or it's not going to get done. I'm here to tell you that that is generally not the case, right? Generally, what can happen is that you can always go above an inspector's head. You can go to the building official, you can go to a supervisor, you can go to the city manager. The problem that people are worried about is retaliation. This inspector is going to retaliate against me, or something like that, and I don't want to piss off the inspector because the inspector itself will get ticked off or upset, or something like that. Well, you know what? So be it. I'm here to tell you that you definitely can go over the head of the local inspector. In many cases, they are not actually the AHJ, right? They are actually deputies of the AHJ. So they're there to serve at the will of whoever's the decision maker for that governmental entity. So in many cases, it's the building commissioner or it's the building official who deputize their inspectors to carry out their tasks for them. That doesn't mean that the electrical inspector can just make up things, right? Because you might be surprised that the building official may not agree with the position of that electrical inspector. Now, you may have building officials that don't have an electrical background, and so they rely heavily on the electrical inspector. And so they're going to give them the preponderance of whether or not they're correct or not, unless you can bring an argument that shows that they are wrong. But for people out there who literally do say that the AHJs can make you do anything, you only have so much authority over somebody is the willingness to them to do something to appease you. In other words, if I bully somebody into something, then I give the appearance of authority to them. That if they follow what I say, then they're given that power, that authority. But I'm telling you right now, the electrical inspector does not have that authority. They cannot make up things. They might try to do it. It's up to you whether or not you want to go over their head. Now, I get it. Sometimes it's easier for little things to just say whatever, accept it, make them happy and move on. I get it. But there are occasions when there's significant differences in what the inspector wants you to do than what is considered acceptable in the National Electrical Code. And you have to be willing to either step up and fight it or shut up and accept it. And you really can't keep whining about it if you choose to accept it. I was a head of jurisdictions. I always told my inspectors that, I fully expect you to enforce the NEC, not to enforce your own personal will on anything. Now, it could be that the inspector just lacks the knowledge. Maybe it's ignorance of a code change or ignorance of some interpretation that may be incorrect and they just don't know what they're doing. But you happen to know. Well, you have every right to challenge them. Now, if you're worried about retaliation, then you got to remember something. That inspector is working for the people. They're working in a jurisdiction. They are subject to losing their job no different than anybody else. And if you make a big enough stink, then go to the city manager or go to city board, one of the city council meetings, or you want to send a formal letter to the mayor, and you were to actually show a proper interpretation of something and show how their interpretation is causing you more money or is not within the scope of the NEC, or basically personal desires versus minimum standards, then you can cause them a lot of heartache. Now, if they want to do retaliation, all you've got to do is document it and show that it was retaliation. And then you do what? You go crying back to the city again. Don't be afraid to stand your ground. Now, I'm not sitting there saying for everything, because you know what? That old saying of crying wolf, if you challenge everything and you end up being wrong, then it's not going to look good on you, and it's not going to bolster future outcomes that are in your favor if you're challenging something. But look, if you know that you're right on something and you get other people's opinions and other people's interpretation, and you just know you're right, and this inspector is just making you do something for no reason, and you don't stand your ground because you're worried about retaliation, really, you're the contractor. Why do you give a damn about that? You're saying, well, because my jobs won't get completed. Well, then if they don't, then I would be crying up the chain to somebody. I would make that inspector's life a living hell. Personally, I'm not there to kiss their butt. And I used to say that for all of my inspectors. That's why I used to tell them, and why we used to have training every week. I'm like, I want you to be on your toes. I want you to be the best educated out there when it comes to the NEC and code changes. I want you to be on top of everything. But unless you can provide a code reference for why you fail somebody, don't you go failing them if you cannot provide an actual code reference. And I tell you right now, if a customer or stakeholder came to me with any thoughts of retaliation from one of my inspectors, dude, they'd be written up in a heartbeat. Okay, I would write you up in a heartbeat, baby, because the integrity that you have to maintain as a government official outweighs you just wanting something done for your own personal belief. And if you don't understand something, or you're not educated, maybe you don't understand grounding and bonding well enough, then the real responsibility is on the jurisdiction, whether it's a supervisor or whoever the leader is, to make sure that you get the adequate training. So another misconception is that the electrical inspector is the AHJ. Now, I'm not going to tell you that that's not the case in a very small jurisdiction where it might have the inspector is actually the building official too, or in an area where the electrical inspector has been given the authority to be the AHJ, right? But that's typically not the case in most jurisdictions. The electrical inspector, there's somebody over them. And even a supervisor may not necessarily be the AHJ. It may be acting as a deputy of the AHJ for the ultimate decision maker. And that is who's been charged with making decisions on the behalf of the city. Now, when I was in Richmond, that individual was Art Dahlberg when I was there. But Art would consult with me. And when I was in Alexandria, Virginia, the AHJ was John Catlett. Although John would work with me, he knew my expertise was in electrical. But at the end of the day, he was the AHJ. It was my responsibility to make interpretations based on the NEC on behalf of John or behalf of Art. But ultimately, at the end of the day, I had somebody that I always answered to. And he could disagree with me if he wanted to. That's his prerogative as the AHJ. But as an electrical inspector, I'm charged with making decisions on behalf of my building official, on behalf of my building commissioner, that type of thing. So on TikTok and other social media platforms, I hear people say that the inspector can fail you for anything. That's bullshit. And now that's not saying they don't. Okay? That's not saying that they haven't in the past. Okay, what we're saying is that they're not supposed to. And nobody's challenged them. Let's put it that way. And maybe you don't want to be that person. I get it. Maybe you don't want to be that one that does challenge them. And maybe you feel like the squeaky wheel gets the grease and you don't want to be that guy. You're just happy with making them happy. Well, if that's the case, then you can't be the one that bitches when they make you do something. You can't have it both ways. Same way I tell people about the NEC. If you don't like something in the NEC and you bitch about it, but you're not part of the reason for the change, or you don't speak up and submit code proposals and whatnot, then you really have nothing you can say. There's things in the code. People ask me all the time, AFCIs. I support AFCIs. It's in the code. I don't necessarily agree with everything about them, but damn it, I will support their application and their use. Because if I believe that it should be changed, it's up to me to submit public inputs for change. Now, if I cannot articulate a change well enough and I'm only be pushing an opinion, if all I'm pushing in is an opinion, then I know that my experience on code panels is that it's not going to go anywhere. So I'm not going to waste my time. I'm not going to change the direction of a code panel simply because I don't like something or I disagree with it personally, right? That's never going to win. It never does. Historically, if you go back and look at code proposals, they don't make it when you're given opinion. In fact, what the code panel will say is that there was no substantial evidence or no substantial documentation to support a position. And that immediately is a rejection. immediately it's gone. It gets thrown in that round filing cabinet at the end of the table. And you go, well, wait a minute. That made sense. No, it didn't. You didn't make sense. That's the reason why it didn't make it. It may have made sense in your brain, but you didn't convey it properly into paper. And that's what you have to do to get a code panel to understand and listen. So, it's kind of funny. I watch TikTok. I don't do as much on it. I watch these social media platforms. I watch people talking out of their ass, making all these claims that the inspectors can do this and do that. And the reality is, they can't. But if they try to and you don't hold them accountable, shame on you. Okay? So, again, you say, well, wait a minute, it's the interpretation of the electrical inspector. Yeah, that is true. And if there's a difference in agreement on the interpretation, then the chances are the inspector and his boss is going to side with the inspector. But if there is legitimate doubt in enforcement of the NEC, and you can present that, and the inspector still chooses to ignore it, then you can go above their head and go to whoever their boss is. And again, if you're worried about retaliation, trust me, they can get in more trouble for retaliation. And they don't want that on their shoulders either, trust me. Ask me how I know, okay? Because I had inspectors that worked for me. I had some of them that we had to get rid of because they weren't doing what they were supposed to do. And what did I do? I got rid of their ass. Okay? Ask them about it in Alexandria. So, at the end of the day, and a great inspector, by the way, but didn't do what he was told. So, what happened is his ass got removed. That's how it works. There is no loyalty in there in the sense that if I'm your supervisor and you're doing something wrong and you're a servant of the public, that you're getting paid a salary, and you do something wrong or impose your own will on somebody and it gets back and you did retaliation, then there's going to be problems. Now, I'm not saying everywhere in a perfect world. Come on. I'm not saying everywhere in a perfect world that it's not an issue. But look, let's face it. Accountability is important, and anybody that's making up stuff has to be held accountable. At the end of the day, it's whether or not you want to be that guy. And some of you don't want to be that guy. I get it. I'm saying sometimes you got to be that guy. But stop thinking the AHJ can do anything they want at any given time. People that say that ain't got a clue. The only reason they're saying that is because they've had jobs they've been on rejected. And it was for the stupid reason they might feel, and then they start formulating this opinion that, well, this suckers can reject me for anything. No, that's because you were too pussified to stand up for something that may have been right. And now you're letting it taint how you do it moving forward. So you got to man up sometimes and stand up for your rights. So that's all I got to say about that, folks. So you've heard my opinion on it. Until next time, stay safe. God bless. And, hey, sometimes you got to stand your ground. Peace.